I want to share with you today my summer/holiday dish, the Tian. Now, the first time I came across this dish, I was living in Boston, and it was absolutely wonderful. It's essentially a gratin without all the massive amount of cream and cheese, but you can put cream in it if you want. And I generally make it with squash, eggplant, tomato, and then sometimes I'll put in some bell pepper, but generally it's squash and eggplant. And when they roast together, they get this nice kind of mushy, creamy texture that's absolutely delicious. The outside gets nice and brown and caramel, and you get a little bit of tooth to it. And then the bottom is this bed of leeks that I sometimes put mushrooms in. Absolutely delicious. And it's a great replacement for, say, a regular potato gratin or green bean casserole, anything like that. Without further ado, let's get into the mise en place, get everything prepared, and then we start building. The first step for any vegetable dish is to get the right vegetables. For my Tian, I love using squash. But along with the squash, you want to have different textures and flavors. You want a bit of a variety. That way it's more melodic as opposed to just a single note that you hit throughout the meal. For my Tian, I use yellow squash, also known as crookneck, zucchini, red bell peppers. These are, I believe, Aloha red bell peppers. It's a variety that just recently made it to the market. Eggplants, tomato, and leek. Along with that, I'm going to use a little bit of cream with the leeks. That's optional, you don't need to. And some butter. Now, what we're going to do is slice everything pretty much the same size. So for that, I have a little miniature mandolin. The only thing that's not going to get sliced to pretty much a similar same shape and size is the leeks. The leeks are going to be quartered lengthwise, finely minced, and then that's all going to be rinsed off because you have to clean your leeks. A lot of the time, I haven't rinsed these yet, but a lot of the time you have sand all over them, and that is also on the inside because of the way they grow. One of the things to be very careful of is these smaller ones don't have guards. So when you set your size, that's my thumb right against the blade. Be very careful. When you use a mandolin, you have to pay attention. Generally, the best thing to do is if you have a zucchini, cut the blossom end and hold on to the vine end. When it comes to right about here, this acts as kind of a stopper to prevent your fingertips from getting into the blade. I'm going to start the prep with the leeks. I'm going to trim them, cut it in half. Go ahead and quarter half it again. And then from here, just going to slice it nice and thin. That's the last of our leeks. I'm going to give it a quick rinse through the water and then going to strain it out. Do your leeks first before moving on to the other prep, so that way they have a chance to really drain, get that excess water out, because the next step for the leeks is we're going to saute them. And you don't want them to be wet where they steam, you want them to actually saute and caramelize a little. One of the keys to this dish, as you're doing prep, is trying to stay as consistent as possible. That's why I'm using this mandolin. I'm going to set it to a certain thickness, and everything is going to be cut at that thickness. Another option, aside from a handheld slicer, is a food processor with a cutting blade. Now, depending on how thick the cutting blade is, that may limit you. But, those things are absolutely quick, and they work just fine. Part of preparing this meal is shopping. And when I was at the store, I was making sure that all the squash that I got was of a similar size. And that way it keeps everything nice and consistent. When we finally get in and start constructing this dish, we're going to do it by color. You want an alternating pattern of colors. So as you're prepping, keep all light colors together. half, and then in quarters. And there we go. There's all of our vegetables prepped. Go ahead and use medium heat for this. You want it to cook, but you don't want it to cook too fast. Now to get this into the pan. Make sure it's a nice, even layer. Cream measurements are really by taste. Sometimes I use cream, sometimes I don't. And go based on what you like. Get a little bit of salt in there, just a little. And now let's start building out how this Tian's gonna look. You build patterns, right? And it's just patterns and colors. And you can just go with whatever patterns you want, as consistent or inconsistent as you feel. I have a feeling too, you can get a good idea of how somebody thinks by how they build out one of these Tians. For example, I think I'm a little chaotic. After this is all roasted, it's gonna look beautiful regardless of how you lay out the vegetables in the pan. I usually make this in a pie pan, and so I shingle all the vegetables together in a spiral. And that usually looks really striking. Get a little olive oil on top, and then we're getting this right into the oven. Some salt, some olive oil, and now this is going right in the oven. And here we have the second Tian. Already in the pan, I have garlic butter and some julienne sun-dried tomatoes. On top of that is going to go a can of plum tomatoes. And now this one, we can just lay this one out any way we want. Same process as last time. And I think I'm just going to go with a different pattern. And one good thing about the eggplant is the eggplant is substantial enough and of a big enough size that you can actually use it to kind of compress everything so you can keep building layers. This particular rendition of the Tian is going to turn out super tomatoey, and I think it's absolutely delicious this way. This is packed pretty full. It's about ready to go into the oven. But what I want to do before we get there is start filling in gaps. At this point, I think we're okay. Give it a little salt. Hit it with just a little bit of chicken broth. This one will be a little more watery, a little more tomato saucy. Some olive oil. And into our oven, just like the other one at 350. Now this has been in the oven for about an hour, hour and a half at 350 with a bunch of other things. So I'm just gonna get a bit of this. Just gonna get a bit of this here. So if you go deep in, there's some leaks on the bottom with the cream. Get it all together in one bite. All right, I have a feeling this is gonna be really hot. The leaks in the cream give it a bit of earthiness. The squash and the tomato. Lightly give it a really good acidity. This is a great summer dish or a holiday dinner, which is what I'm doing it with. Give it time, and once it comes out of the oven, give it about 15 minutes to cool. And if you want, dress it with a little bit of butter on top to give it a bit of a glisten and a sheen. Otherwise, it's a fantastic dish. Great way to get people to eat an excessive amount of vegetables. And it just tastes fresh and acidic and delicious. Enjoy.